Welcome to the Irish Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the Irish American Baseball Society. If you love Ireland and baseball, you're one of us. Visit us online at irishbaseball.org. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Irish Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Becker. In today's episode, I'll be talking to John Fitzgerald, who's the founder of the Irish American Baseball Society, about the movie Emerald Diamond, which he produced. Later, our very own Jim Ward will be discussing an interview clip from MLB legend Steve Garvey, and Conor Santoianni will bring us some baseball history. Let's get things started by welcoming John Fitzgerald back to the show. How are you doing, John?
I'm good, Rick. Thanks.
So today we are going to talk about your 2006 blockbuster movie, The Emerald Diamond. That was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not really, because this movie is what led to the entire organization and some really great work. So some great things have come out of this movie. Why don't you first just explain to everybody listening, if they watch the movie, what they'll see?
Yeah, blockbuster. I've never heard it described like that, but that's cool. I broke even on it, so that I guess, to me it is a blockbuster. Yeah, so the film, it came out in 2006, and it tells the story of baseball in Ireland from about 1995 to 2006. And at the time, that was basically most of what we knew baseball in Ireland to be. We've learned since the film that there's, it goes back way further than that. But the film tells this story of how the Irish national baseball team was formed. And it's kind of a classic underdog story. And it's about a bunch of guys who came together because they could be the only or the first Irish national baseball team. There was nobody else that cared in Ireland. There was nobody else that could claim to be this, and they wanted to do it, and they wanted to put the Ireland jersey on and play baseball. And as you might imagine, if you haven't seen the film, if you decide you're going to be a baseball team and you go into an international competition against teams that have been playing for years and years and years, you're going to get beaten pretty bad, and they did. But that's part of the story.
And building a national baseball organization in Ireland, there are some things you don't even think of when you think, how does somebody go about starting something like this? To the weather in Ireland and how it affected the fields that they had to build so they could have practice.
Yeah, I mean, just to create the team, my understanding from the film and from what I've learned since is, if you're the first, you basically just have to pay the fee and then get your uniforms, and you can go on the field. And as far as the actual fields go in Ireland, yeah, that's a challenge. They had to account for the fact that, a nice day in Ireland in the middle of the summer, it might rain, half the day. So you need a field that can absorb that and allow you to, either play through it or sit it out and come back as soon as the rain stops and get cold too. But these guys, they're tough, and they play. I mean, they're there to play baseball. They're not there for rainouts. There are no rainouts in Ireland.
And when they first started practicing, things that we take for granted in the United States, they didn't have mounds. They had to do batting practice pitching without having a mound. You don't even think of those things when you're trying to build an organization.
Yeah, there's so many things like that. I mean, where do you get a glove in Ireland in 1996 when there's no baseball? Where do you get a baseball? How do you line the fields? How do you teach somebody how to hit a baseball? A lot of these guys had played baseball in some form or had played co-ed softball in Ireland, but there were newcomers that they had to convince to play who didn't really know the game at all, and they had to teach the game to them while trying to figure out these logistics of, not only how are we going to fly to the tournament, where are we going to stay, but who's going to fill out the lineup card, who's going to explain what a hit and run is to the half of the team that's never done that. And just like tons of challenges like that you would just, here in America, you show up at a baseball field, there's an L screen and you can throw BP. There's nothing like that in Ireland, at least not then. So there were a lot of obstacles that I think these guys figured out as they went along, that this was not going to be as easy as they hoped. And to their credit, they kept playing.
This movie is so interesting. If you have the chance and You can actually still pick it up by going to the Irish American Baseball Society website, and there are various ways to get a hold of this DVD and see this movie. It is really, really worth the watch. There's so many things that just wouldn't cross your mind. I know there's a segment where you talk about baseball in Northern Ireland, and there are teams that are made up of Catholics and Protestants on the same team, and a player says something to the effect of, it always felt like soccer and rugby were English games, and hurling and Gaelic football were Irish games. But baseball is from America, so it's neither group has like a monopoly on the game, so everybody was able to get together and enjoy it without all of the politics that might be associated with other sports.
Yeah, that was surprising to see. It's we didn't know what to expect when we went up to Belfast. We didn't know if it was a Catholic sport or a Protestant sport or or what. And we got up there and it was baseball. That's all it was. And that was probably the most powerful thing that we saw in the whole time we were filming the movie. And it's interesting because baseball in England is actually really big. So you would think that maybe there was some carryover from that and it would be considered an English sport, but it wasn't. It was a sport for whoever wanted to play. Nobody was, restricted from playing. Nobody felt out of place on a certain team or whatever. There were teams, and they would travel into the Republic of Ireland for games, and the teams from Dublin and the vicinity of Dublin would travel up to Belfast. And except for a few instances where people were traveling in cars with baseball bats, and the police wanted to know why they were doing that, there was no incident on the field, and that was really, really cool to see.
And another segment sort of on those same lines, Cuban baseball teams that were made of exiles who went to Ireland and then formed these baseball teams. And it's so funny because some of them, the guys are like in their 50s, they're pudgy Cuban guys, but they are still playing like they're 22, like they're flying around the bases. If they don't agree with the umpire's call, they are right up in his face. That segment was so fun to watch two different cultures kind of come together. The Cuban culture, which has been about baseball since the beginning, and then the Irish culture where they're just trying to learn it and they're seeing the enthusiasm and the excitement that you can get from a culture that really, really loves this game.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the film. What happened was, my understanding of what happened was, Shannon Airport was a refueling stop from Havana to Moscow. And so people would be flying back and forth, and they would just get out and they wouldn't go back. I guess that's part of how the Cuban community in Dublin started, is from that, if my information is correct. When the fields were built in 1998, there were people playing on the fields, and nobody knew who they were. They would show up, and there would be like cleat marks in the dirt. Nobody, like, who else is here playing baseball? And eventually they got hooked up with the Cuban guys, and the Cubans joined the league. And what was really interesting was that happened, I guess, in the early 2000s, and pretty soon their teenage sons were playing on the Irish national baseball team because they had grown up in Ireland. Now they were playing the game of their homeland, Cuba, and they were playing it for Ireland because that was their adopted country. So that was really cool. There's just a lot of really interesting elements like that, the Belfast stories, and then just the guys who started the whole thing that wanted to play for Ireland because they were so proud of being from Ireland. They were so proud to play baseball for Ireland. So you have all of these things, these different people who are proud of being Irish and coming together for different reasons to represent Ireland.
And speaking of being proud of being Irish and wanting to wear that Ireland name across your chest, if I'm not mistaken, you got interested in the Irish national team because you wanted to join it.
That's right. It was, I think, like 2003 or 2002. I was reading an article about the Greek national baseball team. So I went online and I looked up the Irish national team. I found it, wanted to play, and I thought I could. The key here is that you have to be a citizen of Ireland. So you have to have a parent or a grandparent who was born in Ireland in order to get citizenship so you can play. And my grandmother was an Irish citizen, but she was not born in Ireland. So it was that little discrepancy that I was not aware of. And I went, I went through about 3 months of training here at home in New York in anticipation of trying out for the team. I was on the phone with these guys, emailing them, heard all these cool stories. I was like, wow, this is incredible. At the time, I was working in the film and TV industry, and I had no intention of making a film until the night I found out, I'm not going to be able to play for this team. I was like, wow, well, that stinks. Okay, what else could I do? And then I was just like, well, you know what? I've been working in the industry. Maybe I should make a film about this. And so I contacted them and I said, listen, can't play for you, but maybe I can help publicize what you're doing. And they said, yeah, sure. So I flew over with my buddy Bill Winters, who's he's a cameraman, or he's a director of photography, and he brought his camera, and the rest is history, I guess.
That was John Fitzgerald, founder of the Irish American Baseball Society. I'm Rick Becker, and now I will turn it over to Jim Ward on the Irish Baseball Podcast.
Thanks, Rick. Today we're hearing from Los Angeles Dodger legend and an inductee in the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame, Steve Garvey. In this clip, Steve discusses the three big league managers he played for in his major league career: Walter Alston and Tommy Lasorda with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and Dick Williams with the San Diego Padres.
It was in the beginning, it was Alston.
Right.
I think I told the story last time about being a bat boy in spring training and back in 1956, and Alston was a manager. And then, through this wonderful, great Disney story of me 14 years later, finally getting a call up to the big leagues with the Dodgers, and Walt was the manager then. And of course, we had Tommy Lasorda, I was blessed to have some great managers, and I had Jack McKean as my general manager, as a matter of fact, with the Padres. So managers and general managers have been a big part of my life, and people who I've looked up to. And there are different styles in management, as there are in business, as there are in life. Walt Alston was a quiet leader, at 6'3", really strong guy out of Ohio. Didn't have a lot of rules, but he wanted you to make sure that those rules were important. And if you broke them, then you were going to get his wrath, So he was that type of manager, very thoughtful. When he called you over to talk to you, he knew exactly what he wanted to say. He didn't mince words. He gave you great advice. He really wanted you to be ready to play every game, to get the signs, to be a thoughtful player, and play the game as a good teammate. And there's nothing wrong with that. He got him in the Hall of Fame, So then Tommy Lasorda comes along, and Tommy's pretty much just the opposite. I called him the P.T. Barnum of baseball. Loud, gregarious, does mince words, so to speak, and uses a lot of them, and a few four-letter words, usually in team meetings. But he was different. He was more of a psychologist, and he knew what kind of buttons to push with each guy. It may be he had to yell at Valentine, and May had to put his arm around me when I was in a slump. So he was one of the real great managerial psychologists who knew that when he had talent, the most important thing over a long season is to be able to mentally get that talent to get into the gate every day, or get up to the plate, or take the snap, or whatever it is, and give 100%. And of course, I had Dick Williams with the Padres. So I may have a record. I played for 3 Hall of Fame managers. Dick was a tough guy. Dick was more of a drill sergeant. He didn't take a lot of time with the young guys. He liked the older guys, especially with the Padres when Goose Gossage and Greg Nettles joined. The 3 of us had experience and maybe 10 World Series amongst the 3 of us, and he wanted us to take over and do the leading of the young guys, which we gladly did, and it paid off. '84, we went to the World Series for the first time with the Padres, but he was a tough guy, and as you see, the quiet, strong type, and the gregarious type, and another strong guy who didn't put up with a whole lot, but all 3 of them made the Hall of Fame. So they're different managerial styles that lead to success.
This is the Irish Baseball Podcast. That was baseball legend Steve Garvey from an interview with the Irish American Baseball Society. It was kind of interesting to hear him talk about Walter Alston, Dick Williams, and Tommy Lasorda, three really good big league managers, all with at least 1,500 wins. Of course, Dick Williams, we knew him up here in Boston when he was managing the Boston Red Sox, his first managerial job in 1967, then went on to World Series fame with the Oakland A's, then the California Angels and Montreal Expos, and then, as Steve alluded to, his time in San Diego before finishing up in 1988 with Seattle. Of course, Dick, a no-nonsense kind of guy, had 1,500 wins in the major leagues, along with Tommy Lasorda. Tommy just finishing shy of 1,600, and Tommy was one of those guys. One of my favorite lines from Tommy Lasorda was, the favorite food of his was anything that ended with a vowel. But Tommy was great. He was made for television. He was made for the media and talking with the press, and some very iconic press conferences from Tommy Lasorda, but a really energetic guy. He really put his players first. He was a big cheerleader for them, for sure. And of course, you had Walter Emmons Alston. Of course, Walter's probably the winningest guy out of this bunch. He had almost 2,100 wins. He had 2,040 wins out of 300, almost 3,658 games in the major leagues. Kind of known as the quiet man, but probably not so quiet, as Steve alluded to in that clip. Our members can get more of the interview with Joe and Steve Garvey at irishbaseball.org. I'm Jim Ward, sending it back to Rick Becker on the Irish Baseball Podcast.
Thank you, Jim. It's always great to hear from the great Steve Garvey. This is the Irish Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Becker, and here's Conor Santoianni with some baseball history.
Hi, my name's Conor Santoianni. I'm an outfielder on the Irish national baseball team. Today, I'd like to tell you about an Irish baseball legend named Hugh One-Arm Daley. Hugh Daley was born in Kerry in 1847. He came to America as a young boy. As a teenager, Daley wanted to be a big league pitcher. There was only one problem. Daley had lost his hand in an accident. But Daley followed his dream. He finally got his chance to pitch in a big league game at the age of 34. Daley won 23 games in 1883 and 28 games in 1884. He also threw a no-hitter and struck out 19 batters in one game, a record that lasted for nearly a century. Daley had a legendary temper. He got into fights with fans, umpires, coaches, and even his teammates. Daley once punched his own catcher in the jaw during a conference on the mound. Over the course of his career, Daley started 163 games, and he completed 157 of them. His record of completing 96% of his games started will probably never be broken. For more information on Hugh One-Arm Daley and other Irish baseball legends, visit irishbaseball.org.
This has been another episode of the Irish Baseball Podcast. I want to thank John Fitzgerald for joining us on the show today. You can get free access to his movie, The Emerald Diamond, by becoming a member of the Irish American Baseball Society. For Jim Ward and Conor Santoianni, I'm Rick Becker on the Irish Baseball Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Irish Baseball Podcast. The Irish Baseball Podcast is a production of the Irish American Baseball Society. Visit us online at irishbaseball.org and connect with us on social media. And remember, there's no place like home.